So, WB Games Montreal are clearly getting closer and closer to the reveal of this game. It's taking a very long fucking time, in my opinion. They teased the first teaser way back in September of last year. It's now May as of this recording date. So, yeah. But I've been thinking a lot about this game, and a lot of people think it is going to be revealed very soon. It was meant to be revealed at E3 this year, but there's going to be no E3 this year, so yeah. But anyway, I decided to write a very, very long list of my wish list, and here's what I want to see in the new Batman game. Side missions have always been a part of the Arkham series, and over time, they slowly evolved and became more in depth with a lot more substance to them. However, I want to see WB Montreal really push the limits with side missions and go in an almost RPG-like style with their side missions, where they are more of a self-contained story mission kind of thing, and have little sub-stories that feel like they exist within that universe, but aren't really associated with that necessarily that story. I think something like The Witcher 3 really did this well and almost perfected it, I'd argue, but I don't want an RPG necessarily. I just want side missions that are a little bit more in depth and not quite as shallow as they were in the past. Maybe something that was a little bit more like Season of Infamy with Arkham Knight. I'd be happy to see fewer side missions and instead get longer, more in-depth ones. But I also think it is important to have little side missions as well that could be added in along with these much larger ones that could have a nice little sub-story within that game. And I'd love to see that be expanded upon, because I think Arkham Knight had some good side missions, but it also had some terrible ones as well. And I definitely think that WB Montreal can expand upon what Rocksteady had made and kind of gotten there in Arkham Knight and make it just way better. Something that WB Montreal themselves actually implemented into the Arkham series was random crimes. It was something that we saw in Origins, and I think the idea of random crimes actually did work quite well in Origins, but it did feel repetitive and just kind of unfinished, even though it did work somewhat well. I really would like to see WB Montreal try and expand upon that idea and what they did in Arkham Origins, but at some point random crimes are just going to get repetitive if they constantly put out throughout the game and they're the same thing, because you can only have so many unique encounters. But I think a larger Gotham, and obviously now that we have far superior technology to the PS3, we probably will get something like that if it is implemented, that'll be less repetitive, a bit more refreshing, and it'll be much larger in scale, I think, very similar to kind of the riots that we saw in Arkham Knight. I definitely think it's a good way to implement having random people to just fight throughout the open world, because if this is going to be a populated Gotham and it's not going to be like the Arkham series, it's going to be very hard to put kind of thugs in the world that are there without having them terrorizing people or whatever. There needs to be a decent story reason as to why there are thugs you can fight in the city. And obviously you could probably have lower socioeconomic neighborhoods where you could go and it'd be a lot easier to fight a bunch more criminals. But I definitely think having random crimes is probably a good way to kind of change up how the random fights are going to work in the open world if the rumors are true and this Gotham is populated. Something that's never really been focused on a lot in previous Batman Arkham games, I'd argue, is the detective side of things. It's almost always been used for simple side missions where you just had to scan and wait for dialogue to play out. But I would like to see this be put in a more kind of in-depth way and put more kind of burden on the player themselves to kind of figure it all out. Something very similar to what we had in Telltale, but not quite the same, because I don't think that was 100% executed well, and I don't really know how that would work in a game like this. It worked well for the Telltale series, but I think it would really help to better expand upon kind of that detective side of Batman and exploring a trait I feel hasn't really been given the proper focus it's deserved in the past, especially in the Arkham series, and would also just help create better immersion as well, because like I said, I just don't think the detective side of things has really ever been of great focus, and it's something that has really just been put towards a simple scan and that's it, and then you just have to replay the video. But there have been times where you've got to find stuff and that, but you don't figure anything out. It's all scripted dialogue. So I would love to see kind of you have to make the connections to the player. Maybe if it's a murder, you have to figure out who the murderer is. All this other stuff. But obviously as Batman, you've got a lot of technology at your disposal. So I don't know how if they want to implement something like this, and I would love to see them do it, I don't know how exactly they would execute it, but I think there's probably a good middle ground to meet between what we've had in the past and kind of something more like the Telltale series and other games that have kind of a detective-based crime-solving minigame in them. A simple but small thing is traversal. Since I have no doubt we'll be getting some form of vehicles in the game, whether it be the Batmobile or the Batbike or whatever it may be, I obviously just want them to remove the combat side of things. It was something so different from what we've seen in any other Arkham game, and the tank drone battles were just kind of annoying and repetitive. Rocksteady did a really good job at implementing them into the game, I think, and it definitely wasn't a terrible feature, but I'd rather just not see it return in the game, and I'm pretty sure it won't considering the reception it got in Arkham Knight. But I'd be happy to see kind of the chase and you have to take down a vehicle. I'd be happy to see that, but it'll be interesting to see how vehicles are going to work in this game, especially if Gotham is populated. So I don't know how they're going to work around not hitting random cars and civilians. Maybe only certain areas you'll be able to drive in. I don't really know. And they'll probably also have to speed up traversal for other characters that we've seen in the past, like Nightwing and Robin. But I don't know how they're going to speed up their traversal at all. So they'll have to kind of work around that as well if they are playable in the open world, like the rumors suggest. Riddler trophies, one of the greatest things to ever exist in the Batman Arkham games. We all love those fucking things. But we all know by the end of Arkham Knight they were so fucking stale and annoying, and it was just getting ridiculous. And I would still like to see collectibles make a return, but definitely not in the same way that they have in the past. Spider-Man PS4 took a lot of inspiration from the Arkham series, but one thing I definitely think it did better was its collectibles. Something in a very similar sort of sense where there are a lot of different forms of collectibles, but in smaller scale, I think would be a much better and just a less annoying kind of thing to collect. And they also probably should add some better rewards for collecting these collectibles. It'll add a better sense of reward, and it'll also give you something to work towards rather than just a boss fight or maybe a skin that you get for 100% completion. I definitely think they can implement these far better than Rocksteady have in the past or WB Montreal did in Origins. I'm sure there's a great middle ground they can meet between lots of collectibles and no collectibles. There's something there, but I think something that Spider-Man PS4 implemented it really well, and they should take some inspiration from that game. Something the Arkham series I felt always fell short on was Gotham City itself. Now, obviously, at the time these games were being made, there was a short amount of, time that was being put into development, and Rocksteady was a very small team. But when they kind of expanded that into the open world and things got bigger and bigger, I always felt that they didn't execute it as well as they should have, and we never really got the full Gotham City we ever really expected to get. Now, Asylum was amazing because it was kind of that claustrophobic, trapped kind of feeling that it created, and it's what made the Arkham series really, really good from the beginning. But, like I said, when we expanded it out, we never really quite got Gotham. But with a bigger group of devs, better technology, and a lot more time to work on this game, I hope to see a more vertical and just overall bigger in size Gotham. Especially since this is a reboot, they can redesign Gotham all they want, even though they didn't stop Rocksteady with Arkham Knight. There's definitely a lot that WB Montreal can do to improve on the open world, create much bigger skyscrapers, a much more dense city, and it'd just be a lot better to play in and create a much better sense of immersion and really feel like Gotham City. So far, a lot of what I've talked about is things that we've already seen in the past, and I think WB Montreal can improve upon them in a lot of ways, and these are obviously more of the weaker elements of the series. But now I kind of want to expand upon things we've never really seen before. And one thing I think could be great is the ability to choose your own specific set of gadgets. Now, this could work really well or really bad. In terms of collectibles, it could really take away from the technical side of things, and if you don't have that specific gadget you need to solve that kind of collectible, it would, be really annoying if that was the case and you'd have to go back. But if they did do that, I think that would actually be okay, and it would give the player a better sense of customization with their loadout as well, and, give the player a certain amount of slots they can use and have that maybe be upgradable over time, so you can carry up to 12 to 13 gadgets by the end of the game when you're fully upgraded. And yeah, it would just give the player something more to work towards. Maybe if the game's taking place over multiple days, you can choose certain gadgets to build, something like they did with the car in Arkham Knight, how you could choose certain upgrades for the car and once you reach a certain point you got that upgrade. So maybe they could do something like that for the gadgets in this game, especially if it's taking place over multiple days. Now, speaking of kind of gadgets and stuff, it would be really great to see the Batcave kind of come in and be just bigger and much larger in scale, with maybe a multi-level Batcave with an elevator and things like that, where you can go change your suit, view all your collectibles, have nice little pieces of fan service and lore hidden around the cave. Wayne Manor would also be nice to see, simply just to explore as Bruce Wayne, or even just to see more of Bruce Wayne himself and have maybe missions where you play as him instead during the day, because that's never really something we've seen in a Batman game except for the Telltale series. But that was obviously very different because it was a Telltale game, and those are pretty linear. If not though, I would still just be very happy to see a much larger in-depth Batcave instead of having Wayne Manor, because I mean, don't get me wrong, Wayne Manor would be nice to explore, but if we don't need to go there for story reasons, they really don't need to force it. The combat system has been such a big staple of the Arkham series, and it's what really made the series gain its popularity and what made it so great. But I would love to see the free flow system just get a touch of a rework. The free flow system is amazing, but I would love to see maybe just a bit better AI when fighting Batman, and have the AI kind of fight dirty instead of throwing just a ton of thugs at us and not really thinking about how to make the combat more harder and a little bit more technical. And I'd love to see just that AI grab onto Batman's cape, hold him, do something dirty, take bits from the Uncharted series where that AI would grab Nathan Drake, fight dirty, and it might force the free flow system to change up a little bit and make the player just play a little differently. Because in the comics, Batman does get hit. It's not like the Arkham series where you can take down a ton of thugs and be fine at the end of it. Make it a little bit more realistic, especially if they want to go for a darker and grittier story. I mean, at the end of the day though, the free flow combat system doesn't necessarily need a massive rework or a big change up. So if they want to keep it the same, that's fine. They'll probably implement new things anyway if they're reusing it. So I'm sure it'll still be fine if they don't want to make a massive or a small adjustment / rework to the combat system. Speaking of combat though, however, the Predator system I feel could have a little bit more technicality added to it and a little bit more realism as well. Maybe have the shadows be a little bit more important, have somewhat of a fear meter, give Batman a set amount of batarangs, or just have a little bit more harder to take down villains that adapt to you when you're taking them down in a certain way, much like it kind of worked in Arkham Knight, but it didn't work. Sometimes the AI wouldn't adjust, so I think a little bit better AI in that term would be great, but a little bit more difficulty and some realism added to the Predator system would be nice, but they need to do it in a way so you still feel like you're in control, but it still adds a little bit more technicality to it. Now, I've touched on a lot of gameplay, but in terms of story, I'd love to see a little bit more of a darker, grittier story. The Arkham series has always been a kind of homage to the animated series, because, I mean, Asylum and City were written by animated series creator Paul Dini. However, now, with Scott Snyder being the heavily rumoured and almost self-confirmed writer, we could definitely see a change in tone this time around. And like I said, I personally want a more darker, grittier story, and with Scott Snyder's stories, they tend to be in that more darker, grittier direction, so I'm definitely looking forward to moving away from that more lighter tone stories. I mean, Arkham Knight was definitely dark, and so was Asylum in some aspects. These stories are still great, but something a little bit more psychologically focused, like we saw in Asylum, would be nice to see this time around, and a different writer is always nice, and especially a different good Batman writer like Scott Snyder. And lastly, something that's been heavily rumoured for a long time is the playable Bat family that you can use in free roam and in the story, and I definitely want to see it happen. Getting to play as Robin, Nightwing, Batgirl, all those types of characters would be extremely fun and take away from some of the repetitiveness of the gameplay we've seen in the past when just simply exploring and messing around in the open world. It also opens up the possibility for co-op, something I know a lot of people want to see. Personally, I don't really care for it because I have no idea how you would implement that at all into an Arkham game or an Arkham-like game, but I think for those that want it, it would probably help sell a little bit extra. So it'll be a nice little gameplay element we've never really seen before in any Arkham games, and being able to explore as someone different will just be refreshing, and they'll probably have to throw up some of the traversal techniques and change up those elements as well, like I said earlier. I talked about a lot of shit in this video, and I cut out a lot of it as well when writing this. But if you did enjoy it, subscribe to the channel. I'm probably going to be doing a lot more Batman stuff when the game gets announced. It'll be a lot easier to talk about. And give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment what you want to see, what I didn't touch upon in this video. And yeah, make sure you check out everything that's Silver Soul Gaming. We've got a website which is a bit more like article focused and a little bit more analytical on the news kind of stuff. I have other stuff. My links will be in the description, my Twitter, all that. And if you like the music in the background, the music will also be in the description. I will see you guys later this week for another video.